Hello. It all started with a phone call. One of those unexpected ones that catch you at just the wrong moment, like right when you're slicing an avocado or trying to enjoy your only 5 minutes of peace. I was in my office, leaning back in my chair, the end-of-day sun streaming through the blinds, casting lazy shadows on my desk. I had my feet up, going over some numbers, when my phone buzzed, rattling on the desk. The name on the screen read Rachel, my wife, which wasn't unusual except for one thing, the time. It was 3 in the afternoon. She was supposed to be at her studio, finalizing a big project for her art clients. I frowned, my mind immediately wandering through all the possible reasons she might be calling. Maybe she just wanted to say hi. Maybe there was a problem with the car, or maybe... My stomach twisted. Something was wrong. I answered, half expecting to hear her cheerful voice, maybe a laugh as she asked what I wanted for dinner. But instead, there was a pause, and then I heard her voice, tight and strained, like she was reading from a script. "Hey Jack, we need to talk." My heart sank. Those 4 words, I knew what they meant. You didn't need to be a genius to know that "we need to talk" was never the prelude to good news. I forced a smile, even though she couldn't see me, trying to keep my tone light. "Hey, Rach, what's up?" I asked, hoping I was wrong, hoping this was just a misunderstanding. There was another pause, one that stretched on just a little too long, the silence on the other end of the line pressing down on me like a weight. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jack, can you meet me at the cafe near the studio? I think it's better if we talk in person." My stomach twisted into a knot. This was bad, really bad, but I kept my voice calm. "Sure, Rach. I'll be there in 20. I hung up, my hands still gripping the phone a little too tightly. My eyes drifted to the stack of paperwork on my desk, but there was no way I could focus now. I grabbed my jacket, shrugged it on, and headed out the door, my mind racing with questions. What was going on? Was she in some kind of trouble? Was she leaving me? No, I shook my head, trying to banish the thought. Rachel wasn't like that. She loved me. We were solid. Or at least I thought we were. The drive to the cafe was a blur. I barely remember the lights, the turns, the way the city blurred past me. I parked in front of the small brick building, the familiar neon open sign glowing in the window. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, and pushed open the door. The bell above the door chimed, and I spotted Rachel immediately. She was sitting in the corner, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug, her eyes downcast. She looked up when I approached, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed like she had been crying. My heart sank even further. I slid into the seat across from her, my eyes searching her face. "Rach," I said softly, "what's going on?" She looked away, her hands trembling as she set the mug down. "Jack, I need to tell you something, and I need you to just listen, okay?" I nodded, my chest tightening. "Okay." She took a deep breath, her eyes still refusing to meet mine. "I made a mistake, Jack, a big one, and I don't know how to make it right." My throat went dry, my heart pounding in my ears. "What kind of mistake?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked up at me then, her eyes filled with tears, and I knew before she even said the words, the realization hitting me like a punch to the gut. "I've been seeing someone," she said, her voice cracking. "It started a few months ago, and I swear I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. And now everything's a mess." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The world seemed to tilt around me, the noise of the cafe fading into the background. My mind raced, trying to process what she was saying, trying to make sense of the words that didn't seem real. "Who?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Who is it, Rachel?" She hesitated, her eyes dropping to the table again. It's Eric." The name hit me like a sledgehammer. Eric, my employee, one of the guys who had been with me since the early days, when I first started the business. He was young, ambitious, someone I had trusted. And now he was the one who had been with my wife. I felt a wave of anger surge through me, hot and blinding, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Eric," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "You've been seeing Eric?" Rachel nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Jack. I never meant for it to happen, but it did. And now I don't know what to do." I leaned back in my seat, my mind spinning. This wasn't just about my marriage. This was about my business, my livelihood. Eric was someone I had trusted, someone I had given opportunities to. And now he had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Does he know that you told me?" I asked, my voice cold. Rachel shook her head. "No, he doesn't know. I haven't talked to him since I decided to tell you. I knew I had to come clean, Jack. I knew I couldn't keep lying to you." I closed my eyes, trying to process everything. My wife had cheated on me with one of my employees, and now I was left to pick up the pieces, not just of my marriage, but of my business as well. I had no idea how I was supposed to move forward, how I was supposed to face Eric at work, how I was supposed to even look at Rachel after this. I opened my eyes, looking at her, my chest aching. "Why Rachel?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why him?" She shook her head, her face crumpling as she started to sob. "I don't know, Jack. I was lonely. You were always working, always busy, and I felt like I was losing you. And Eric, he was there. He listened. He made me feel noticed." I looked away, the pain in my chest almost unbearable. I had been working so hard, trying to build something for us, trying to make sure we had a future. And in the process, I had lost her. But that didn't excuse what she had done. It didn't make it okay. "I need some time," I said finally, my voice trembling. "I need time to think about this, to figure out what I'm going to do. About us, about the business, about everything." Rachel nodded, wiping at her tears. "I understand. I'm so sorry, Jack. I love you, and I know I messed up. I hope you can find a way to forgive me." I didn't say anything. Couldn't. I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor, and walked out of the cafe, the bell chiming above the door as I left. The cool air hit me, and I took a deep breath, trying to clear my head. I had no idea what I was going to do. All I knew was that everything had changed, and there was no going back. The drive back to my office was a blur. My mind was racing, replaying Rachel's words over and over again, each one slicing through me like a knife. Eric, my employee. The betrayal felt like it had layers. My wife, my business, the person I had trusted to help me build what I'd worked so hard for. Everything felt tainted, like a shadow had crept over the life I thought I knew. When I got back to the office, I couldn't bring myself to go inside. Instead, I sat in my car, staring blankly out the windshield at the bustling street outside. People passed by, unaware of the chaos swirling in my mind, their lives untouched by the kind of pain that was ripping through me. My hands were trembling, my chest tight. I had to confront Eric, but I didn't know how. I had to see him, but I wasn't sure if I could keep my cool. If I confronted him now, I might lose it, and that wouldn't help anyone. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The one thing I knew for certain was that I couldn't let this ruin me. Not my business, not my life. I had worked too hard to let everything fall apart now. I had to be smart about this, had to keep my emotions in check, even if it felt like everything was crumbling around me. I finally forced myself out of the car, heading up to my office. As I walked through the door, I could feel the tension in my chest, like a ticking time bomb. I needed a plan. I couldn't afford to make a mistake now, not when so much was at stake. My assistant, Claire, looked up as I walked in, her smile fading when she saw my face. "Hey, Jack, you okay?" she asked, her eyes filled with concern. I forced a smile, shaking my head. "Yeah, just a long day. Could you let Eric know I need to see him in my office in about 15 minutes? She nodded, her brow furrowed. "Sure thing." I went into my office, closing the door behind me. I sank into my chair, my mind still racing, trying to figure out how to approach this. I couldn't let Eric know just how much I knew. Not yet. I needed information. I needed to understand how far this had gone, how it had affected my business, if at all. And most importantly, I needed to keep my emotions in check. The knock on my door came sooner than I expected. I looked up, taking a deep breath. "Come in." The door opened, and there he was, Eric. He walked in with that easy smile, the one I had always thought was genuine, the one that had fooled me into believing he was someone I could trust. My stomach churned at the sight of him. "Hey, Jack," he said, his tone casual as he closed the door behind him. "Claire said you wanted to see me?" I gestured for him to take a seat, watching him closely as he sat down across from me. "Yeah, Eric, there are a few things we need to talk about." His expression shifted slightly, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "Sure. What's going on?" I leaned back in my chair, trying to keep my tone neutral. "I wanted to go over some of the recent projects you've been working on. I've been hearing some things that concern me." He frowned, his brow furrowing. "Concern you? What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "I've been hearing that there might be some conflicts of interest, that maybe there are some relationships that could be affecting your work here." His eyes widened, and for a split second, I saw something flash in them. Guilt, maybe, or fear. He quickly tried to mask it, his expression shifting to one of confusion. "Conflicts of interest? Jack, I don't know what you're talking about." I nodded, my jaw clenched. "I think you do, Eric. I think you know exactly what I'm talking about." He opened his mouth to say something, but then closed it, his face going pale. The room was silent for a long moment, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on his. "I know about Rachel," I said, my voice cold. "I know about everything." For a moment he just stared at me, his face going even paler. "Jack, he started, but I cut him off. "Save it," I snapped, my voice trembling with barely contained anger. "I don't want to hear your excuses. I trusted you, Eric. I gave you opportunities. I put my faith in you. And this is how you repay me." He looked down, his hands trembling in his lap. "It wasn't supposed to happen," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant for it to go this far. I swear, Jack, I'm so sorry." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "Sorry? You think that makes this better? You've put me in an impossible position, Eric. You didn't just betray me. You've jeopardized everything I've worked for. My marriage, my business, everything." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with desperation. "Please, Jack. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. I'll leave, I held up my hand, cutting him off. "You think just walking away is going to fix this? You think you can just disappear, and everything will go back to normal?" He was silent, his face a mask of regret. I could see the fear in his eyes, the realization that he had crossed a line he could never uncross. And as much as I wanted to throw him out right then and there, I knew I couldn't. I had to be smart about this. I had to protect what I had left. I took a deep breath, my chest aching with the weight of everything. "Here's what's going to happen, Eric. You're going to finish up your current projects, and then you're going to leave. No notice, no fanfare. You're just going to be gone. And if I hear anything that makes me think you're trying to cause trouble for me or for Rachel, I will make sure you regret it." He nodded, his eyes wide, his face filled with a mix of fear and resignation. "I understand," he said quietly. "I'll do whatever you say." I looked away, the anger still simmering inside me, threatening to boil over. "Get out," I said, my voice cold, "and don't make me regret giving you this chance." He stood up, his shoulders slumped, and walked out of the office without another word. The door clicked shut behind him, and I let out a long, shaky breath, my hands still trembling. I had done what I needed to do. I had confronted him, set the terms, and protected my business. But as I sat there, alone in my office, the reality of what had happened hit me all over again. My wife had cheated on me, my employee had betrayed me, and everything I thought I knew had crumbled around me. I leaned back in my chair, staring up at the ceiling, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I had no idea what was going to happen next, no idea how I was going to move forward. All I knew was that I had to try. I had to keep going, no matter how broken I felt inside. The next few days were a haze of damage control. I was caught between trying to keep my business afloat and attempting to piece together the shattered remnants of my personal life. I had given Eric a chance to finish up his work quietly, but every time I saw him in the office, my stomach twisted in knots. It felt like everyone knew, like they could see right through me. The air in the office seemed heavier, the usual camaraderie replaced with an unspoken tension. Couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Rachel's face. Her tears, her regret, and the cold, hard truth that she had chosen someone else over me. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, confusion. I wanted to hate her, but I couldn't. I still loved her, despite everything, and that made it all the more painful. One evening, after another long day at the office, I came home to find Rachel waiting for me in the living room. She looked exhausted, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She had tried calling me, texting me, but I hadn't been able to bring myself to respond. Seeing her there, in our home, brought a fresh wave of emotion crashing over me. "Jack," she said softly as I walked in, her voice trembling. "We need to talk." I dropped my bag by the door, my shoulders slumping. "I don't know what there is left to say, Rachel," I replied, my voice hollow. "You made your choice." She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "No, Jack, I made a mistake. Terrible, horrible mistake. But I love you. I love you more than anything, and I don't want to lose you." I looked at her, my heart aching. "You should have thought of that before, Rachel. You should have thought of that before you." I trailed off, unable to finish the sentence, the words catching in my throat. She took a step toward me, her hands trembling. "Please, Jack, I know I don't deserve it, but I'm begging you. Give me a chance to make this right. I'll do anything." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "Make this right? How? How are you going to fix this, Ratch? You cheated on me with my employee. You lied to me, betrayed me. How do you expect me to just move past that?" She looked down, her tears dripping onto the floor. "I don't know," she whispered, "but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I'll go to therapy. I'll quit my job if that's what you want. I can't lose you, Jack." I closed my eyes, the pain in my chest almost unbearable. I had spent years building a life with Rachel, believing that we were in this together, that we could face anything as long as we had each other. And now all of that had been ripped away, leaving me with nothing but questions and a deep, aching emptiness. "Do you even know why you did it?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Do you know why you turned to Eric?" She looked up at me, her face crumpling. "I was lonely, Jack. You were always at work, always busy. I felt like I was losing you, like you didn't see me anymore. And Eric, he was there. He listened. He made me feel wanted." I shook my head, my heart heavy. "I was working for us, Rachel. I was trying to build something for our future." She nodded, her tears still falling. "I know, and I see that now. I see how selfish I was, how I took you for granted. I wish I could take it all back." I stared at her, the silence stretching between us, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that she was truly sorry, that we could somehow find a way to move past this. But the betrayal was still fresh, the wound still raw. "I don't know if I can do this, Rachel," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." She took another step toward me, her eyes filled with desperation. "Please, Jack, just give me a chance. Let me prove to you that I can be the wife you deserve." I looked away, my chest tightening. "I need time," I said, my voice trembling. "I need time to figure out what I want, what I can handle. Right now, I don't have any answers for you." She nodded, her face crumpling as she wiped at her tears. "I understand. I'll give you all the time you need. Just, please don't give up on us." I turned and walked down the hallway, leaving her standing there, her sobs echoing through the house. I felt like I was drowning, the weight of everything pulling me under. I needed air, needed space, needed to figure out how to navigate this mess that had become my life. The next day at the office, the tension was palpable. I hadn't told anyone about what had happened, but I could feel the unease in the air. Eric was avoiding me, his usual swagger replaced with a nervous energy that was impossible to ignore. He kept his head down, his interactions with the rest of the team minimal. It was like he knew that he was walking on thin ice, that one wrong move would send him plunging into freezing water. I tried to focus on my work, but every time I saw Eric, every time I heard his voice, the anger flared up inside me, hot and unrelenting. It wasn't just about Rachel, it was about everything he had taken from me. He had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and I couldn't just let that slide. I had to be smart, had to protect my business, but the desire to confront him, to make him pay for what he had done, was overwhelming. That evening, as I was closing up the office, I got a call from Claire. She sounded worried, her voice hushed as she spoke. "Jack, I don't know if I should be telling you this, but I overheard Eric on the phone earlier. He was talking to someone about you. It sounded off." My stomach dropped, a sense of dread washing over me. "What do you mean, off?" I asked, my heart pounding. Claire hesitated, her voice filled with uncertainty. "He was talking about some kind of plan, something about getting back at you. I don't know the details, but it didn't sound good. I just thought you should know." A cold anger settled over me, my jaw clenching. I had tried to give Eric a way out, a chance to leave quietly, but now it seemed like he had other ideas. If he was planning something, anything, to hurt me or my business, I needed to know. I needed to be ready. "Thanks, Claire," I said, my voice tight. "I appreciate you letting me know. Don't worry, I'll handle it." After I hung up, I sat there in my office, the silence pressing down on me. If Eric was planning something, I needed to find out what it was before it was too late. I couldn't afford any more surprises, couldn't afford to let him take anything else from me. I had to be one step ahead, had to protect what was left of my life. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, determined to figure out what Eric was up to. I went through his work files, combing through emails, looking for anything that might give me a clue. It felt like I was playing detective in my own business, searching for answers to questions I never thought I'd have to ask. As I was going through his desk, I found a notebook tucked away in the bottom drawer. I opened it, my eyes scanning the pages, and my stomach twisted. There were notes, detailed notes about clients, about deals we had in the works, about things that he had no business knowing. It was clear that he had been planning something, gathering information, maybe even preparing to steal clients or sabotage projects. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and anger. I had tried to be reasonable, tried to handle this without causing more damage. But now it was clear that Eric wasn't going to go quietly. He was a threat, not just to my marriage, but to my business, to everything I had worked for. And I couldn't afford to let him win. I closed the notebook, my mind racing with the possibilities. I needed a plan. I needed to protect myself, to protect my business, and to make sure that Eric couldn't hurt me any more than he already had. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of everything pressing down on me. This wasn't just about betrayal, it was about survival. And I was ready to fight. The next few days were a delicate dance. I had to act like everything was normal while trying to uncover Eric's intentions and protect my business. I couldn't let him know I was on to him. Not yet. I needed to be sure of what he was planning, needed concrete evidence before I could make my move. It felt like I was walking on a knife's edge, every interaction laced with tension, every decision carrying the weight of potential disaster. I spent my nights going over the notebook I had found in Eric's desk, piecing together the information he had gathered, trying to understand his endgame. He had notes on several of our clients, important clients, the kind that had helped me build this company from the ground up. He had details about meetings, negotiations, even personal information about the clients that he could potentially use against me. It was clear he had been planning something for a while, and the thought made my blood boil. He hadn't just betrayed me on a personal level. He had betrayed the business, the people who depended on me, the company I had built with my own two hands. One night, as I sat at my desk, my eyes tired from hours of staring at the notebook, I realized that I couldn't do this alone. I needed help, someone who could look at this objectively, someone who could help me get the evidence I needed. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. "Hey, Mike," I said when he answered, my voice weary. "It's Jack. I need your help." Mike had been a private investigator before he retired, and we had stayed in touch over the years. He was one of the few people I trusted completely, and I knew that if anyone could help me figure this out, it was him. "Jack, it's been a while," he said, his voice warm. "What's going on? You don't sound so good." I let out a sigh, running a hand through my hair. "I'm not. I've got a situation here, something personal and business related. I need someone who can help me gather some information, someone who knows how to dig without being noticed." Mike was quiet for a moment, then he spoke, his tone serious. "You know I'm retired, right?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I know, Mike, but I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. I've got an employee, someone I trusted, who's been seeing my wife, and now I think he's trying to sabotage my business. I need to know what he's planning before it's too late." There was a long pause, and then I heard Mike sigh. "All right, Jack, I'll help you. I owe you one anyway. Let's meet up and go over what you have." We arranged to meet the next day, and I felt a small sense of relief. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I had spent too long feeling like I was drowning, unable to see a way out, and now, finally, I had a plan. The next afternoon, I met Mike at a small diner on the edge of town. He looked the same as always, gruff, with a no-nonsense demeanor, his eyes sharp and observant. He listened as I explained everything that had happened, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he nodded, his eyes narrowing. "All right, Jack, this guy sounds like trouble. If he's got this much on your clients, he could do some real damage. But don't worry, we'll figure out what he's up to." I handed him the notebook, and he flipped through it, his brow furrowing. "This is good," he said. "It's a start, but we need more. I'll look into his background, see if there's anything else we can use. In the meantime, you need to act like everything is normal. Don't let him suspect anything." I nodded, the weight of everything pressing down on me. "I can do that. Just let me know if you find anything." Mike gave me a reassuring smile, clapping me on the shoulder. "We'll get through this, Jack. You're tougher than you think." I went back to the office that afternoon, determined to follow Mike's advice. I had to keep my cool, had to act like everything was fine, even though I felt like I was unraveling. I kept an eye on Eric, watching his movements, paying attention to who he talked to, what he did. I knew he was up to something, and I couldn't afford to let my guard down. A few days later, Mike called me, his voice filled with urgency. "Jack, I've got something. You're going to want to see this." We met at his place, and he handed me a file, his expression grim. I did some digging into Eric's background. He's got a history, Jack. A history of getting involved with people he shouldn't, manipulating situations to get what he wants. And it looks like he's been in contact with one of your competitors, someone who would benefit from your client's jumping ship. I felt my stomach drop, a cold anger settling over me. "He's trying to steal my clients," I said, my voice trembling. "He's trying to ruin me." Mike nodded. "It looks that way, but now we have something on him, something we can use. If you want to confront him, we need to be smart about it. We need to make sure he doesn't see it coming." I took a deep breath, my mind racing. I had tried to give Eric a way out, tried to handle this without causing more damage. But now it was clear that he wasn't going to stop until he got what he wanted. He had crossed a line, and I couldn't afford to let him win. "All right," I said finally, my voice filled with determination. "Let's set a trap. I want him to know that I'm not someone he can mess with." Mike smiled, a glint of admiration in his eyes. "That's the spirit, Jack. We'll make sure he gets exactly what's coming to him." Over the next few days, Mike and I put our plan into motion. We needed to catch Eric in the act, to get the evidence we needed to expose him not just to me, but to the whole team, the clients, and anyone else he might have tried to manipulate. We set up a meeting with one of my most important clients, one I knew Eric had been targeting, and arranged for Eric to be there, thinking it was just another negotiation. The day of the meeting, I could feel the tension in the air. Eric walked in, his expression casual, but I could see the nervousness in his eyes. He had no idea what was about to happen, no idea that the walls were about to close in on him. We sat down in the conference room, the client on one side of the table, me on the other, with Eric sitting beside me. We went over the usual pleasantries, and then I leaned forward, my eyes locked on Eric. "You know," I said, my voice calm, "it's funny. I've been hearing some things lately. Some things about people trying to undermine this company, trying to take what isn't theirs." Eric stiffened, his eyes widening slightly, but he tried to mask it, forcing a smile. "I'm not sure what you're talking about, Jack." I smiled, shaking my head. "Oh, I think you do, Eric. And I think it's time we set the record straight." I nodded to Mike, who was sitting in the corner, and he stood up, placing the file on the table in front of Eric. "These are records of your communications with one of our competitors," Mike said, his voice cold. "Emails, calls, meetings. You've been trying to steal clients, trying to sabotage this business. And we have all the proof we need." Eric's face went pale, his mouth opening and closing as he tried to find the words. "Jack, I can explain." I cut him off, my voice filled with a cold fury. "You don't need to explain anything, Eric. You've already said enough. You betrayed me, betrayed this company, and now you're going to face the consequences." He looked at the client, his eyes filled with desperation, but the client shook his head, standing up. "I'm done here," he said, his voice filled with disgust. "I'm not going to do business with someone who can't even trust his own employees." Eric turned to me, his eyes wide, his face filled with fear. "Jack, please." I stood up, my eyes locked on his. "Get out, Eric. You're finished here." He stood there for a moment, his face twisted in a mix of anger and desperation, but he knew he had no choice. He turned and walked out of the room, the door slamming shut behind him. I took a deep breath, the tension slowly starting to ease from my shoulders. It was over. I had faced him, had taken back control, and now, finally, I could start to rebuild. Mike walked over, a small smile on his face. "You did good, Jack. It's not easy, but you handled it." I nodded, my heart still pounding. "Thanks, Mike. I couldn't have done it without you." He clapped me on the shoulder, his eyes filled with warmth. "You're tougher than you think, Jack. You've got this." As I left the office that evening, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The battle wasn't over. I still had to pick up the pieces, still had to figure out what was next for me and Rachel. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control. I had faced the betrayal, had fought back, and now I was ready to move forward. After confronting Eric and getting him out of my business, I felt an unexpected emptiness. I had expected to feel triumph, to feel some sort of satisfaction from seeing him exposed, but instead, there was just a hollow sense of exhaustion. The betrayal was over, but the consequences of it lingered. Rachel, my clients, my sense of who I was. It was time to deal with the aftermath. The day after Eric's departure, I returned to my office. The whispers among the staff had already started, their hushed conversations stopping abruptly whenever I passed by. Everyone knew something had gone down, and while I had tried to keep the details under wraps, I knew that rumors were bound to spread. I couldn't let the uncertainty fester. I needed to address my team, to put everything out in the open, or at least enough so that they understood the situation. I called a meeting that afternoon, gathering everyone in the conference room. The tension was palpable, the air heavy with unspoken questions. As I stood in front of them, I took a deep breath, my eyes scanning the room. "Thanks for coming, everyone," I began, my voice steady. "I'm sure most of you have noticed that Eric is no longer with us. There have been some issues of trust and loyalty, that have forced me to make some tough decisions. I can't go into all the details, but what I want you all to know is that I will always do what's best for this company and for each of you. We're a team, and I value every one of you. I know this is a difficult time, but I'm asking for your trust and patience as we move forward." There was a murmur of agreement, nods around the room, and I could see the worry start to ease from their faces. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I needed them to know that despite everything, I was still in control, that the business was still on solid ground. After the meeting, Claire approached me, her face filled with concern. Jack, I just wanted to say, I'm really sorry about everything. I know it must have been hard. I nodded, giving her a small smile. Thanks, Claire. It's been rough, but we'll get through it. I appreciate your support. She hesitated for a moment, then said, if there's anything I can do, just let me know. We're all behind you. Her words meant more than she knew. The loyalty of my team, the people who had stood by me through everything, that was something I didn't take for granted. I had almost lost it all because of Eric, but now I was determined to rebuild, to make things right. Later that evening, I returned home, my heart heavy. Rachel was waiting for me, her eyes filled with uncertainty as she watched me walk through the door. She had been giving me space, trying to let me figure out what I wanted, but I knew we couldn't keep avoiding the inevitable conversation. We had to face this, together or not. Jack, she said softly as I walked in, her voice tentative. How was work? I sighed, dropping my bag by the door. It was okay. I talked to the team, let them know that Eric's gone. They're worried, but I think they understand. She nodded, her eyes searching my face. And how are you? I looked at her, the woman I had once believed I would spend the rest of my life with, and I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. I don't know, Ratch, I said honestly. I'm trying to hold it together, trying to figure out what comes next. But it's hard. It's hard to look at you and not think about everything that's happened. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she took a step toward me, her voice trembling. I know, Jack. I know I hurt you, and I hate myself for it. I wish I could take it all back. But I can't. All I can do is tell you that I love you, that I want to make this work, if you'll let me. I looked away, my chest tight. I still love you, Rachel. But love isn't enough right now. I need to be able to trust you, and I don't know if I can do that. Not yet. She nodded, her tears spilling over. I understand. I'll do whatever it takes, Jack. I'll wait as long as you need. I don't want to lose you. The pain in her voice cut through me, and I felt my resolve waver. I had loved Rachel for so long, had built a life with her, and now, despite everything, a part of me still wanted to find a way back to what we had. But I knew it wasn't that simple. Trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight. It would take time, effort, and a willingness to face the difficult truths between us. I think we need some time apart, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. I need space to figure out what I want, what I can handle. And I think you need time to figure out why this happened, to work on yourself. Her face crumpled, her sobs breaking the silence of the room. Okay, Jack, she said through her tears. If that's what you need, I'll do it. I want you to know that I love you, no matter what. I nodded, my heart aching. I love you too, Rachel. But right now, I need to focus on healing. The next day, Rachel packed a bag and left. We both knew it wasn't permanent, that this was a step we needed to take if there was ever going to be a chance of reconciliation. Watching her leave was one of the hardest things I had ever done, but I knew it was necessary. We couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay, not when the wounds were still so raw. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my work, determined to rebuild what had been broken. I reached out to clients, reassuring them, making sure they knew that the company was still strong, that I was still committed to providing them with the best service possible. It was exhausting, both physically and emotionally, but it was also cathartic. It gave me something to focus on, something to work toward, and slowly, I began to feel a sense of stability returning. One afternoon, as I was wrapping up a meeting, I got a call from Mike. His voice was upbeat, a stark contrast to the serious tone I had grown used to. Jack, I've got some good news. I reached out to some of your clients just to check in, and they're sticking with you. They respect you for how you handled everything with Eric, and they want to keep doing business with you. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, a sense of relief washing over me. Thanks, Mike. I don't know what I would have done without you. He chuckled. You're tougher than you think, Jack. You've been through hell and you're still standing. That counts for something. After the call, I sat back in my chair, a smile tugging at my lips for the first time in what felt like forever. The road ahead was still uncertain. My relationship with Rachel, the future of the business, But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a chance. I had faced betrayal, had seen the worst of what people were capable of, but I had also seen resilience, loyalty, and love. That evening, I decided to take a walk. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. I didn't know what the future held for me and Rachel, but I knew that whatever happened, I would be okay. I had survived the worst of it, had fought to protect what mattered to me, and now I was ready to face whatever came next. I pulled out my phone and sent Rachel a message. "I hope you're doing okay. I'm thinking of you." A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with her reply. "I'm doing my best, Jack. I love you." I smiled, slipping my phone back into my pocket. There was still so much left unsaid, so much that needed to be worked through, but I was ready. I was ready to pick up the pieces, to rebuild, and to see where the journey would take me. And maybe, just maybe, Rachel and I would find our way back to each other. The weeks apart from Rachel were some of the longest and most challenging I had ever experienced. The house felt empty without her presence, the silence often unbearable. I missed her. Missed the way she would laugh at my jokes, the way her smile could brighten even the darkest days. But I also knew that this time apart was necessary. We both needed to figure out who we were, what we wanted, and whether we could truly forgive each other. I spent my days focusing on the business. Slowly but surely, I was beginning to see progress. Clients were coming back, confidence was being restored, and the team seemed more united than ever. The scandal with Eric had shaken us all, but it had also brought a renewed sense of loyalty and purpose. We were in this together, and I knew that if I was going to move forward, I needed to let go of the bitterness that had been eating away at me. It wasn't just about the business, though. I had to rebuild myself as well. I took up running, something I hadn't done since my college days, hoping that the physical exhaustion would clear my mind. I read books, some about forgiveness, some about relationships, trying to understand where it had all gone wrong. I started therapy, something I had always been skeptical about, but I found that talking to someone helped more than I could have imagined. It was a place where I could unravel the anger, the pain, and the confusion, where I could start to make sense of everything. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I found myself sitting on the back porch, a beer in hand, staring out at the fading sunset. I hadn't heard from Rachel in over a week, and I missed her more than I cared to admit. I wondered if she was okay, if she was finding her own way, if she was still hoping that we could fix things. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. I glanced down at the screen, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw her name. "Hey Jack, I know it's been a while, but I've been thinking a lot. I'd really like to see you if you're ready." I stared at the message, my heart pounding. I had been waiting for this, hoping for it, but now that it was here, I wasn't sure if I was ready. I had been working so hard to heal, to move forward, and seeing Rachel meant opening myself up to the possibility of more pain. But it also meant opening myself up to the possibility of love, of rebuilding what we had lost. I took a deep breath and typed out a reply. "I'd like that too. Let's meet at the park tomorrow." Her response came almost immediately. "I'll be there. Thank you, Jack." The next day, I arrived at the park early, my nerves on edge. I sat on a bench, my eyes scanning the path, waiting for her. When I finally saw her approaching, my breath caught in my throat. She looked different, her hair pulled back, her face more tired, but there was a softness in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. "Hey," she said softly as she reached me, her voice filled with emotion. "Hey, Ratch," I replied, standing up. We stood there for a moment, an awkward silence hanging between us, before I gestured for her to sit beside me. We sat on the bench, the park around us quiet, the sun dipping low in the sky. I could feel the tension, the uncertainty, but I also felt something else. Hope. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she said after a long silence, her eyes focused on the ground. "I've been going to therapy, trying to figure out why I did what I did, why I hurt you the way I did. And I know that there's nothing I can say to make up for it. I know I broke your trust, and I don't expect you to just forgive me and move on. But I want you to know that I'm committed to changing, to being better. And if there's any chance, even the smallest chance, that we could make this work, I want to try. I looked at her, my heart aching. It's not that simple, Ratch. What you did. It broke me. It broke us. And I've been trying to pick up the pieces, trying to figure out if I can ever trust you again. I still love you, but I need to know that things will be different, that we won't just fall back into the same patterns. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I know, and I don't expect it to be easy. I know it will take time, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I'm not the same person I was, Jack. I've been working on myself, trying to understand my own flaws, my own insecurities. And I know I have a long way to go, but I want to take that journey with you, if you'll let me. I looked away, my chest tight. There was a part of me that wanted to hold on to the anger, to the pain, because it was easier than letting myself be vulnerable again. But as I sat there, looking at Rachel, I realized that I couldn't move forward without letting go. I had to let go of the bitterness, the resentment, if I ever wanted to find peace. I want to try too, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. But it's going to take time. We can't just go back to the way things were. We have to start over, rebuild from the ground up. She nodded, her tears spilling over as she reached for my hand. I understand, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I love you, Jack, more than anything. I looked down at our hands, her fingers intertwined with mine, and I felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be days when the pain resurfaced, when the trust felt fragile, but I was willing to try. I was willing to fight for what we had, for the love that was still there, buried beneath the hurt. We spent the rest of the evening walking through the park, talking about everything. Our fears, our hopes, our regrets. It felt like the beginning of something new, a chance to rebuild on a foundation of honesty and understanding. We both knew it wouldn't be simple, that there would be challenges, but we were ready to face them together. Over the next few weeks, Rachel and I took things slow. We went on dates, spent time talking, and worked on rebuilding our trust. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when the past would creep in, when the hurt would resurface, but we faced it head-on, refusing to let it define us. We went to couples therapy, something we had never considered before, and it helped us learn how to communicate, how to be honest with each other even when it was difficult. One evening, as we sat on the back porch, watching the stars, Rachel turned to me, her eyes filled with emotion. Jack, I know we've been through a lot, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but thank you. Thank you for giving us a chance. I looked at her, my heart swelling with love. We're both human, Ratch. We've both made mistakes. But I think what matters is that we're willing to fight for each other, to fight for what we have. And that's enough for me. She smiled, her eyes brimming with tears. I love you, Jack. I love you too, I said softly, pulling her into my arms. As we sat there, holding each other, I realized that I had finally found peace. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I knew that as long as we faced it together, we could handle whatever came our way. We had been through hell, but we had come out stronger, more honest, and more committed to each other than ever before. Together, we were ready to rebuild, to pick up the pieces, and to create a future filled with love, trust, and hope. Bye-bye.